Okay. So now we're talking about deviation. So we've moved from talking generally about supply and demand, and our whole goal in this introduction for supply and demand was to introduce the first fundamental welfare theorem. And so you all are familiar with that. And so again, the basic idea is that, you know, competitive markets are efficient. That's the first fundamental welfare theorem's claim. So now most of the rest of what we're going to do in a lot of the class is we're going to break the first fundamental welfare theorem. Remember, the first fundamental welfare theorem has these conditions, right? And so no market power, no externalities, and we haven't defined all these things yet, and perfect information, right? In order for competitive markets to be efficient. So now we're going to begin to explore inefficiencies. So what causes inefficiencies? That's what we're doing at a high level. And the first thing that we're going to look at is government policy that disturbs the competitive market equilibrium. Okay. And so we have two basic policies that economists talk about to introduce these ideas. And one set of policies is price regulations, and another set of policies is taxation. Okay, and so the main point of talking about price regulation or taxation is to show that they create losses in efficiency. And remember, for efficiency is measured by total surplus, or by another name, net social benefit, right? So basically what we're showing is we demonstrate that price regulations and taxation cause total surplus to be smaller than total surplus would be under free markets. Okay, so is there anybody that has any questions about that right now? Basically what we're doing, okay? Because the sort of important thing, and I'll pick somebody to chat with. Okay. So how about Shirang? How are you doing this morning?
Doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Okay. So do you understand this process that we're going through. We first defined competitive markets, and we showed that the competitive equilibrium maximizes total surplus. And now we're going to show that if we have a price regulation or if we have taxation, that total surplus is going to be smaller. Does that whole idea of efficiency and inefficiency make sense? I see people going in the chat, but I don't know if there's questions. So Chiante, if you see something, let me know, okay? So Sharang, does that make sense to you, this sort of approach?
Mostly.
Well, do you have any questions about it?
Not at the moment, but I am trying to grasp it.
Yeah, okay. So hopefully this will help. Tell me if you think this helps, okay? And this is, based on what we've already done and some diagrams you've already seen. So if we put our market diagram here, and I'm gonna put, this is for dollar sign. We're measuring dollars on this axis, and we're measuring units of a good in a market on this axis. And I put here the demand curve, and I'll put here the supply curve, right? And so one thing you should know is, so in this sort of environment, right, I can measure total surplus, right, Shrang? Do you remember that?
Right.
Right. And so for us, for each unit that is produced, we're going to measure total surplus. It's just going to be the distance here. And if we add extra units, right, it's going to end up being an area, but I'm just going to try to draw it as stripes, right, for different units. And these are going to be our contributions to total surplus as we produce more and more of the good, right? And then we also said, and I don't know if you remember this, but over here, if units of the good are produced, we end up with the negative amounts of total surplus. And I don't know if that is sticking with you, but remember, supply, you can basically think of as being the cost society bears for producing something, right? And you can think of down here on the demand curve as this being the value of the good or the benefits for each unit, right? So can you see, Shrang, that over here, right, the costs are higher than the benefits.
Yeah.
And here, the benefits are higher than the costs. So
Okay.
all of these units over here are giving more benefit than they're giving cost. And so, I mean, that almost by the way the language is, right, that sounds like good stuff, right? Benefits greater than cost, benefits greater than cost. But over here, this sounds like bad stuff, costs greater than benefits, right? And then the other thing that we learned is the market equilibrium, can you tell me, and notice I'm not talking at all about price right now, but the market, what quantity is the market going to produce? The competitive market.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so what quantity of output is the competitive market going to choose?
Um, it's always gonna choose um, lower quantity.
Well, okay, give me a name for it. It's
Oh,
gonna not lower quantity, it's gonna choose the equilibrium quantity.
oh, you're right. Equilibrium point.
Well, okay, so what quantity is that going to be on our diagram?
Um, the one right in the middle.
Well, okay, is there a quantity in the middle?
I'm not really sure what you
It
mean.
well, yeah, because there isn't, right? There's a location in
Yeah.
the middle, but the location is a point, right? In this Cartesian plane. I'll try to highlight it with a circle, right? That point is the equilibrium point, right? But the
Mhm.
equilibrium point is associated with a quantity and a price, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, listen, I'll be super, um, old school here, and right, if I draw another little diagram over here, right, but instead I label these axes. This is the Cartesian plane, x and y, and then which you've been seeing this since you were like in 8th grade, right?
Mhm.
And then I put a point here, right? And then I ask you how much x is associated with that point. What are you going to tell me?
Um, I guess whatever number is on the x
Axis, right?
axis.
Boom, down there, right? That's the amount of x associated with this point. We can also represent the point as an ordered pair, right? So we can say, like, remember the first element in the ordered pair is the amount of x, right? And the second amount is the amount of y. So if I do that, then you know how much x is associated, or what's the quantity of x associated with a point.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, can you tell me what it is?
20,
What?
10.
Yeah, 10, right? Right, and y, right? Same thing's going over here. The only difference is, like, instead of x, we're calling it q. Instead of y, we're calling it dollars, right? It's how we measure price. So this equilibrium point is associated with a quantity that we call the equilibrium quantity, right? And so we would to find the equilibrium quantity, we would do the same thing, right? We would look at that point and we would go, oh, down there is the equilibrium quantity, whatever it is, right? We don't know, but we normally label it as Q star. Does that look good to you? Do you have any questions, Shrine?
Oh no, it's making sense so far.
Okay. So the thing that I want to point out to you is notice, right, that so what we're saying is it's as if by magic, right? But Adam Smith, who is one of the founders of modern economics, he in his famous book discussing these things called The Wealth of Nations, he says, as if by an invisible hand, right? Nobody tells buyers how much to buy and sellers how much to sell, right? Has anybody ever told you how much to buy of a certain thing?
No.
Has anybody ever told you how much to sell of a certain thing? I don't know if you
Mm,
sell stuff or not, but you ever
nope.
have a garage sale, your family or anything like that? We used to have garage sales all the time when I was a kid. But nobody ever told us what to sell. We just decided on our own. It's decentralized planning. It's everybody deciding what they want to do on their own. But in the end, the sellers and the buyers end up trading a certain amount. And there's something magical about that, right? And I use magical in air quotes. And that is that notice that we stop once all of the net benefits, meaning positive net benefits, once all of those have been realized, right? We're going to stop right there. And we're never going to drift over into this area where things are more costly than they are beneficial. Do you see? Do you see what I'm getting at, Shreng?
Yeah.
So the market, because it stops in just the right place, it maximizes total surplus. And that's what we mean by efficiency. So the point about price controls and regulations is what you're going to learn, and what you are learning right now, is that price controls and taxes make us stop at a different point. So, for example, you might have a price control that has you stop over here at this quantity. And as a result of stopping short of the equilibrium quantity, see if I can get this to, oh, it's not gonna, okay, I'll try another line. Of stopping short of the equilibrium quantity, it's going to cut off some of the potential benefits, right? So in this case, right, if we stopped short of the equilibrium quantity, then we would eliminate all of these, I'm going to highlight the area in black, of potential benefits or potential gains from trading between the buyers and the sellers. Those would no longer be realized, right? That would be lost. And we call this the loss of total surplus. We're going to call this, it's an example of a dead weight loss. Okay. Likewise, if we had a type of policy that said, oh, you know, the market's getting it wrong, we need more, right? Then it would force us over into this area where we're producing more. And again, if we're producing more, we're going to be producing past the market equilibrium quantity, and we're going to be adding these negative net benefits, these units where the cost is higher than the benefit to the person receiving the good. Okay. So I really want you all to focus on, you know, the fact that what the market's doing for us is it's getting this quantity just right. That's the argument, is that the market equilibrium quantity is the perfect, in air quotes, quantity of output to produce. And all of the price regulations and taxes, the thing that they do that causes a problem from an economic standpoint, it damages efficiency because it forces us away from that perfect quantity. Okay. So do you have any questions about that, Shreng?
No, so far all makes sense.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and talk to somebody else. So Sophia, how are you doing today?
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Hi. So is everything that I've said, or does everything that I say, does it make sense to you so far? Do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay. So let's talk then, and try to explain to me, and maybe I should actually be talking to Riley about this, because he seemed really convinced about rent control. But I'll ask you, Sophia. So can you give me an example of where you think maybe the market got it wrong? That the quantity that the market's picking is imperfect in some sense.
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Well, let's give an example. I'll just try to pick common examples that I've heard from students in the past, or or the subject of public policy, that kind of thing. Let's talk about the market for healthcare. Okay. Now, absent any government intervention, all right, so minus the Affordable Care Act, minus Medicare, minus Medi-Cal, minus California has these programs to provide subsidized health insurance to children of families that seem that they need it for their kids because they can't otherwise get access to healthcare, right? In a purely competitive market, there would be a demand for healthcare, right? And so I just drew the an illustration, and there would be a price for healthcare, right? I don't know, you all aren't old enough to remember this. Probably every time that you've ever gone to the doctor, you've paid a copay. But has anybody just gone to a doctor that they wanted to as a cash patient and just said, like, I want to see you, I don't care, I'm just going to pay out of pocket, and how much is it for the doctor visit? Has anybody done that? No. Okay. Well, that's the way it used to be, like when I was a kid. Not that nobody had health insurance, but like in the 1970s, when I was young, you would just go in and pay for your doctor visit. That was it. No, I mean, some people had health insurance, but a lot of people didn't. And you would just go and pay out of pocket for the doctor visit. Now, how do you think we should measure quantity for medical care, Sophia?
Usually, it's supposed to be like the other way.
I'm just asking you, what are our units in?
God, how many people do healthcare, or how much healthcare is provided?
Well, yeah. So this is just a demand and supply diagram, right? So this is demand, and for each price, you'll have a different quantity demanded. But what should our units be for quantity? It's like not pairs of shoes. The shoe market, it's pairs. Tomatoes would be, each tomato, and for haircuts, it's the quantity of haircuts, and healthcare is a service. So what should our units be, you think? I would pick doctor visits.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Kind of based on what I described before. So this is just demand, and I know this is probably tripping you up a little bit. I don't know if you're struggling, because it's so different from what we have, right? You think like, oh, I go and I pay a copay, and I get the healthcare that I receive, and but this is what it would look like if it was just a unregulated market. Does that make sense? Or
yeah.
But then there would also be a supply, right? Which would be like just like for haircuts, but it would be doctors saying at different prices that they're willing to see so many patients, right? And as you pay the doctors more, they'd be willing to see more patients, right? Take fewer vacations or whatever. Does that make sense? Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay. So, and then there surely would be, right, like an equilibrium. And it would be here, right?
Correct.
And then as a result of that equilibrium, we would get an equilibrium quantity of doctor visits. And, you know, there would normally be a unit of time here, right? So many doctor visits per year, right? We would measure demand or supply like on a yearly basis or something like that. And let's just put a number here. We'll just say 100. And you know why I'm picking 100?
No.
Okay. How many people are in the US? You know?
A lot. I don't know the number.
See, this is one of those numbers you should always keep in mind, like population, because numbers matter, right? When you start to think about like billions and trillions of dollars and all this other stuff, when you break it down on a per person basis, then it makes context. But if you don't even know, I mean, if we had 5 trillion people in the US, then the numbers we were spending would look a lot different. You know, whether it's consumer spending in total or whatever, but we have about 340 million people in the United States. 340 million. I should ask that on an exam just because you guys should have some context. So I say 100. What do you think I mean by 100 here?
How many doctor visits? It's how many, like the price is the right in the middle.
Well, I'm picking Q, so it's the quantity of doctor visits. 100 doctor visits for 340 million people. That doesn't seem like very many, right? I probably mean 100 million doctor visits, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying that, you know, if there was no government intervention in the healthcare market, that I'm guessing that about 1 in 3 people would go to see the doctor per year. And how much do you think that doctors would charge those 100 million customers to go for a visit?
I'm gonna be honest, I haven't been to the doctors in so long. I thought it goes to like your healthcare and it's like
well, yeah,
provided.
because there's health insurance and it's a regulated market, right? So I mean, I don't know how or why you have health insurance, but a lot of people have health insurance through their employer or their parents' employer.
Yeah.
And that's considered a fringe benefit of employment. But now, because the healthcare market is regulated, a lot of employers are forced to provide health insurance by law.
Yeah.
And those people, so meaning that if the law wasn't there, some of them wouldn't provide health insurance, or they would maybe charge their employees more for the health insurance or something, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying you have to try to imagine in your mind if you erase all of that regulation, right? If you say there is no mandatory health insurance, you could buy health insurance if you wanted to, if it was being offered. But you know what? Health insurance prior to the regulations was pretty rare. There were some health insurance plans, but you know what's the problem with offering health insurance in the absence of a mandate? I don't know if you can imagine, but who buys health insurance if you don't have to? Who would buy it?
Not a lot of people, or like if it's already.
If you
don't have to, then you know.
Yeah, if you don't
buy
have
it.
to. And so when would you voluntarily buy health insurance?
Maybe
if you didn't have to.
Like
How
if
about,
you assume you're gonna be sick.
yeah, if
So,
you're
like,
sick,
yeah.
right? And so if you're sick and you buy health insurance and the health insurance is run to be profitable, right? Then guess how much the health insurance companies are going to be charging? They know that their customers are going to be using it a lot, right? So health insurance is really expensive in the absence of regulation, because what regulation does is it takes a bunch of people that are otherwise healthy who wouldn't buy health insurance because they feel like they don't need it, particularly younger people like yourself. I'm assuming you're healthy. I hope you are.
Yeah.
But a lot of, young people back in the day would say, oh, I don't need health insurance because I'm healthy. Nothing's going to happen to me. And guess what? They were mostly right. And but now those people are being forced to pay for health insurance, even though they don't use it very much. And so their payments are subsidizing the cost of the health insurance to the sick people who really want the health insurance and are very expensive to insure.
I think I know where you're getting at.
Well, what do you think I'm getting at?
If it wasn't mandated, like if it wasn't like, for like current, it would be like super high cost.
Yeah, exactly. And almost nobody would buy it. So I'm trying to get you to imagine the healthcare market with no insurance, basically, because hardly anybody would have health insurance, and no government regulation. And this is what a free market would look like. And I don't know what doctors would charge for a doctor visit, but I can tell you something. My daughter, I took her with our health insurance. So she's about your guys' age. She turns 19 in 1 week. And when she was a baby, she had a really bad ear infection, and they had to go in and do surgery on her ear to relieve the pressure, and so she wouldn't lose hearing. And they put a little tube to drain the fluid from her ear, and it's still in there because eventually they fall out on their own, but sometimes they don't. And it's a really, really tiny tube. And so even now that she's 19, every once in a while she'll get a bad ear infection or something like that, and she needs to go see an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And so I took her to one with our health insurance, and it was $15 for the copay. But she's in a different insurance network than me, which is probably a little bit weird to say because we're on the same insurance provided by Cal Poly. But within the health insurance company, you can choose different medical groups. And so her medical group included this ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I was in a different medical group because the doctors that I like, that are my primary care physician and stuff like that, they're not part of her medical group. And so anyway, I had, he wasn't in my network, but he was in her network. But after seeing what a great doctor he was, and I sometimes have sensitive issues with my ears too, I asked his receptionist on the way out, I was like, well, he's not in my network, but if I wanted to come see him, if I'm having an ear problem, how much could I pay as a cash patient out of pocket? And guess what she told me? Any ideas, Sophia?
No, what did she tell you?
She said $180. I can pay him $180 and then I can just go see him as a private patient.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to guess that that's about what doctor visits would cost if there was no health insurance, right? Does it seem like a fair guess?
Yes.
So we'd get 100 million doctor visits at $180 per doctor visit a year. And does that seem good? I'm saying this is efficient, right? We maximize total surplus. So are you ready to get rid of the Affordable Care Act and get rid of employer mandates and get rid of all that other stuff in the name of efficiency?
That's a lot.
I'm just asking.
I wouldn't say that I'm so ready to get rid of everything.
You don't trust me?
I mean, yeah, I guess.
I don't know. So I put you on the hook, and I'll just ask if anybody else wants to comment on this analysis before we go any further. Anybody? Nobody? Okay, so I'll say one other thing to you about this, or just to close off this discussion, Sophia. So what might your objection be, if you had an objection to getting rid of all that regulation?
Well, there's like specialized doctor visits, so I'm guessing like it all won't be the same price. Like some people is higher than others, and I feel like like insurance, it levels it out.
Well, right, but I still did. I mean, I think maybe this might be a good average price because he was a specialist, ear, nose, and throat specialist, right? So he's not like, just a general practitioner. So, you're right. I mean, like a brain surgeon might charge more for a visit than a general practitioner, but But so would that really be what your reservation is? I think what most people would be worried about is all these people. Do you see what I'm saying? We stop at 100 million, but if the price was zero, right? Or let's say, $15 a visit, right? For like a copay. I don't know what your copay is, but then you'd get something close to the maximum number of doctor visits per year. And let's just put that as it's 320 million. Like, so some people are going to go multiple times a year to the doctor, right? And some people won't go at all. But if doctor visits are basically free, then anybody and everybody who wants to go to the doctor for anything can, right?
Yeah.
And so if people, I'm going to choke a little bit when I say this, okay? If people can't afford to go to the doctor, because just I'm using other people's language, it's not the way an economist would talk, right? If people can't afford to go to the doctor, right, then there are a lot of people who would say, well, it's immoral, it's cruel to deny those people the ability to go see a doctor simply because they can't pay this $180. Yeah. And the free market certainly, right, it equalizes supply and demand. It picks a particular quantity and it's less than the maximum quantity. So there are some people that are not going to see the doctor if we don't have any subsidies or health insurance or things like that. right?
Yeah.
So that's what most people would say. Yeah, the free market maximizes total surplus. It's efficient, but they would, and again, I'm not talking like an economist. I'm just trying to get you guys to understand the argument. But a lot of people would say, oh, but the outcome is immoral because you're denying people healthcare. What do you think about that? I mean, I don't know if that was your reservation, but I sometimes think that maybe, you know, that's what people are thinking, but they wouldn't articulate it that way. But I don't want to stick words in your mouth.
Oh no, I forgot about that side.
I forgot about all the poor people
No.
that aren't gonna be able to see a doctor. You
oh
know,
my God.
$180 seems a little bit sus, right?
Sus.
Yeah. No cap. Right. I'm just saying, right? It seems to a lot of people like this is a bad outcome. But from an economic point of view, it's efficient. So let's just make sure as economists we understand that efficiency and these other concerns are different ones. And our real job as economists is to focus on efficiency. That's what our discipline is about. That doesn't mean that these other concerns don't matter. It just means that there's not a really good way. You know, there are limits to what our discipline can do.
Yeah. So back then, you said in the 1970s, when there wasn't health insurance, what did happen? They just didn't afford it. There wasn't anything in place.
Yeah, some people couldn't afford to go to the doctor. Like I can tell you, so my family didn't have health insurance when I was a little kid, and we did go to the doctor, but normally you would only go to the doctor if you were really sick, right?
Yeah.
And so people, they tried to do their home remedies and do the best they could to take care of themselves and things like that, because they knew if they didn't, it was going to be expensive. And not everybody lived a perfectly healthy lifestyle. I mean, there were a lot of people confused about whether or not smoking was going to damage their health, because there wasn't really good evidence back then, and it took a while for the evidence to accumulate. But there were people like my grandfather, for example, who smoked up until he was 50 and then just stopped, because at that point in time, the evidence had become clear that it really was a major health risk. So he just stopped. And then there are other people that didn't, like my grandmother who kept smoking. But yeah, the point is just that, yes. So that's what people did. Sometimes people don't go to the doctor now. I mean, if you're a little bit sick and you think you're gonna get better and it's an inconvenience, then you might just like take a half day off and rest or something like that, right? And not go to the doctor, just because you don't want to wait to get an appointment at urgent care and have to drive down there and stuff like that, right? But yeah, so people were more reluctant to go to the doctor because it was more expensive back then. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah.
But so the point of regulation, and this is really the final issue in the lecture, and so I just end it with this, is the point of regulation is because of these concerns, people in government, legislators, and the rest of it are trying to change the market outcome. And some of the policies are effective at in this case, like increasing the quantity, right? So basically we're saying here, oh, well, this is the market equilibrium quantity, but from our ethical perspective, it's imperfect. We would like to see more people going to the doctor. And the policies can do that, but they're going to damage efficiency, right? You're going to see that there are these negative contributions to total surplus when we force the quantity higher. So just be looking out when you're doing your exercises and things like that. There's the market equilibrium quantity, that's the most efficient. Anything we do that pushes it to be less, and we could have done an example of where we think there should be less of something, right? We haven't done that example, but it's pretty easy to come up with examples where you think the market would produce too much of something from an ethical perspective. I don't know if you can think of any examples, but I'll give you one really quick, which is heroin, right? We regulate the market for heroin because we think that there would be too much heroin if people were free to buy as much heroin as they wanted, right? But still, that causes inefficiencies if we force the quantity to be less. Okay. Any quick questions? Because we're over time. No? Okay. So if you all need some help with Ignition or anything like that, I'm going to be here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to stop recording. But you guys can file out, and I'll stay here for a few minutes to talk to anybody who needs help. Okay.